Okay, our next lesson we're moving on to here is going to be called string variables. So as with our first lesson, if I run this right now, I'm going to get nothing. There's nothing happening at this point because everything I have is just a comment. So let's have it print something. Let's throw a string in there called lesson number 10 string variables. Okay, so the first thing I have to do is I have to establish a variable. And a variable is just an object that you put into your program that you can affect with different code. So let's create a variable called name, and name is going to equal a string that we will call the most powerful Jedi ever, Luke Skywalker. Simple enough. So we've now instantiated a variable. The variable's name or title is name, and the value of that variable, or the content inside that variable, is a string called Luke Skywalker. Very, very easy. So now that I've created my variable, I can print it. So let's just go simple print name and run. And you can see right there I get my print on lesson 10 string variables and my print on Luke Skywalker. Now here's the question. Do capital letters count? Let's print it and see. Print name. Now you can already see that they obviously do count. We get a red X here that's saying undefined variable. So what it's saying is we don't have a variable that's called capital L N A M E. So when I run that, it gives us our error. Our error is in line 6. We have not instantiated this variable. We haven't put this variable in. We haven't assigned it a value. So it has no idea what variable that is. So when I change it back to lowercase n, we can see now it works. Another common mistake first-time programmers can make when they're printing out a string variable is to include the quotation marks. Now remember, we had to include these quotation marks up here because we were assigning a string value to this variable. If we include the quotation marks right here, we're going to get the literal characters inside those quotation marks, which is just NAME. So here you can see NAME. With those quotation marks included, we get the literal inclusion of every character inside the marks. As I stated before, lots of different functions can be applied to our variable. So let's go through a few of those right now. This function, len, is going to tell us how many characters are in our string, our string variable. In order to print this out, you're going to need two sets of brackets. Len is your function, and then we want len to be applied to our variable name. Now remember, we can't put a capital in here, or the program doesn't know where variable capital NAME is. So just the same variable we've used the whole time. And what that's going to do is it's going to tell us the number of characters inside our string variable. All strings have a numerical value based on how many characters are in them. So when we look at Luke Skywalker, we start with 0, 1, 2, 3. We have to add 1 for the space. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Now when we run it, we come up with 14. Because to account for our start at 0 and the space that we have within our string variable, we always add 1. So anytime you're calculating the number of string variables, you always add 1 in terms of the number of characters. So this print function down here gives us println name, and it tells us, hey, there's 14 characters inside the variable name. String variables can also be combined or concatenated together in several different ways. The first one, the easiest one, is to combine the two like so. Now earlier we talked about how using name would name within the brackets, or sorry, within the quotation marks, would just return the word name. And now we're going to use that to our advantage. By adding name inside the quotation marks and our string variable of name and running them, we get a nice label, nice title, name : Luke Skywalker. So that's one way you can combine or concatenate. Second way is very similar, a little bit more advanced, and further on down the road it's going to give us a few more options. So instead we go %s, and then on the outside we say %name. Now when we run that, we get the exact same option. The third way we can combine or concatenate is to use what we call braces. And dot format name. And when we run that, we end up with string references combined together, all three giving us the same output, but the format that we got that output is different. And we'll see more later about these two options and how they can open up things for you a little bit more. Okay, now moving on to some string methods that we can use with our string variable. Let's go with the first one. It's very simple. Type in all lowercase. And with the method .upper being used, I bet you could guess that it changes it to all uppercase. So if you have an upper, you can probably assume that we have a lower. And when we run that one, it writes it in all lowercase. So both of these, even though I've written them in lowercase or uppercase, when you use the method .upper or .lower, it switches them into either upper or lowercase, depending on the method. Now for our next method, we're going to need a new string variable. So let's go title equals imperial death march. And from that, let's use let's go up here and add in my quotations so that it knows it's a string variable. And then I use print title.capitalize method. And we'll run that. And if you can see here now, the method capitalize has capitalized the first letter of the first word of my string variable. Now the next one that you can use, so I find it to be a little bit more valuable, is title. This one gets confusing. You remember that our string variable, Imperial Death March, is named title. So we're going to go title dot title. And when we run that one, we see that it now capitalizes the first letter of every single word in your string variable. So if your string variable is going to be used as a title, like it is up here, you can apply this code to make sure that every letter gets capitalized. Okay, and the last string method we're going to talk about in this lesson is slices. Slices are a way for you to take a portion of your string variable or any string and use it and just use that chunk. So in this one, we're going to use the squared off brackets, and we're going to say we want character 0 to character 7. So if you remember, all strings contain a number, and they start at 0. So M is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we always have to add 1 for 7. So when we print it, we get may the. And this is that confusing part where you always have to add 1 to account for the start at 0 and for the spaces in your string. So now if we apply slices to our string variable called title, you remember that one was up here, Imperial Death March, then we get, you can also just go :8. If there's no number in the first spot, it automatically assumes you want to start from the beginning. Then the next one I'm going to go print title 9 to 14. The last one will be title 15 to 20. Now hopefully I've added these right. Remember, we're applying this slices method to title our Imperial Death March. And when I run it, we end up with each one on its own line. Imperial Death March. Pretty simple. Alright, I want to make sure that you were following along with all of these. So you should have something quite similar created on your own. This is the end of lesson 10. You can move on and check out the next assignment associated with this lesson.